Okay. Okay. So Stanley, it's up there. What you is screaming out to YouTube, so you should be able to see what's going to look like.
Yeah, I can see it. I do see some controls at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, give it a couple seconds. I just moved those. You're about 10 seconds behind.
But anyways, the stage looks good to me anyways. So we could probably just turn that off. If we just know the controls are going to go away, the stage is fine.
Okay, I'm going to leave it screaming, but I'm just going to put our background logo up there.
Y'all hear me any better now?
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
That's good. I was just making sure. I was getting kind of worried because y'all weren't talking back to me. I was like, did I put it through the laptop audio?
Was Mike planning on having people speak that far back in the room?
I don't know exactly how many people.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll turn the phone off.
I'm gonna go ahead and hang up.
Okay, Michael.
Thanks. Bye.
What are you doing?
Aaron, can you hear us okay?
I can.
Okay. Chance.
Good. Well, I'm a little stressed out because technical issues are always a pain.
Every time, right?
Life is like a box of chocolates.
Yeah. Did you
Practice
pressed it? Exactly. Something
Bye.
like.
Thank Mr. Murphy for that.
So Eric, you want to get started?
Yeah, sounds good. At this time, we call this court to order. Hello, all. My name is Eric Cedillo. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I want to do two things. One, apologize for my appearance. If you can see me, I just recently had eye surgery. And the second thing is I just found out that I'd been appointed the chair of this committee today. So I want to welcome everybody on board and thank you and thank the commissioners for bestowing this incredibly high honor on me. And I welcome all of you, especially our new folks, to this committee. Thank Michael for all he's done over the last year in getting this all prepped and ready to go. At this time, we probably want to call roll. And if you'd like for me to do that, I can call it off, Michael. And
That'd be great.
okay, you guys can just answer with a here if you're present. Camila, Correa, Bourdeau. I believe she's present. I'm seeing her virtual self. Camila, if you want to just express that you're here. I'll move on and come back to her. Elaine, Tess, Campbell.
Eric, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, but I am here. Apologies.
No problem. Thank you. Elaine, Tess, Campbell.
I'm here.
Mildred, Domenech.
Present.
Mildred, Millie, I'm so sorry. How do I pronounce your last name?
It's Domenech.
Domenech. Thank you. Faith Nicole Castillo.
Here.
John Eric Cedillo is here. Walter Hofheinz. Walter Hofheinz. John Yours. John Yours. Lawrence Weiner.
Here.
Bonnie Wells.
Here.
Hey, Bonnie. Levatta Levels.
Here.
Alexis Denard.
Here.
Renato de los Santos.
Here.
And Anna Coca.
Here.
Okay. I believe we have a quorum, and I would ask you, Michael and or Esmeralda, if all legal notices have been posted by the commission and duly called.
Stay out.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Would someone like to move to open the meeting?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to open the meeting. Discussion? Meeting is open. At this time, we'd swear in new members. And I believe I can do that. If you wanted to do it, Michael. But if
He has to be sworn in first if he has not already been sworn in.
I
So
have not, so Michael, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Sure.
Well, just
I can use your
replace his name.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 oaths to,
That one, what is first and then
so the first oath is for statement of elected officer, appointment of officer. So I state your name.
John Eric Cedillo,
This is for,
just for the chair.
just for the chair.
yeah. Solemnly swear or affirm that I have not directly or indirectly. Solemnly swear and affirm.
Solemnly swear that I have not directly or indirectly
Paid, offered, or promised to pay
Paid,
This is
offered,
paid, offered, or promised to pay,
contributed, nor promised to contribute any money
contributed, or promised to contribute any money
or valuable thing or promised such to any public official
or valuable thing or promised such to any public official
or employee as a reward
or employee as a reward
for the giving or withholding
for the giving or withholding,
vote to secure my appointment,
vote to secure my appointment,
and further affirm
and further affirm
that neither I nor any company,
that neither I nor any company,
association, or corporation
association, or corporation
of which I am an officer
of which I am an officer
or principal will act as a supplier of services or goods
or principal will act as a supplier of services or goods
or bid or negotiate supply services
nor bid or negotiate to supply services
or goods for this institution or for the County of Dallas,
or for the County of Dallas,
except as shall be consistent with the policies of Dallas County.
except as shall be consistent with the policies of Dallas County.
So help me God.
So help me God.
To the second oath. This is the oath of office for the state of Texas. I state your name. State your name.
John Eric Cedillo,
Solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of the office of Dallas County Citizen Election Advisory Committee
faithfully execute the duties of the office of the Citizens Election Advisory Committee of Dallas County,
and will do to the best of my ability
and will do to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States
the Constitution and laws of the United States
and of this state, so help me God.
and of this state, so help me God.
So I believe you go ahead and swear in the new members. Be Bourdeau, Campbell, Domenech, pronounce that, Domenech, Ms. Levels, Mr. Santos, Coca. So I don't know if you want them to stand and raise their hand.
Yes, go ahead and stand and raise your hand if you just called your name. State your name.
I, Elaine Campbell,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of the office of the Citizens Election Advisory Committee
the office of the Citizen Election Advisory Committee
of Dallas County, Texas,
of Dallas County, Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
and I furthermore solemnly swear or affirm that I have not directly or indirectly
that I have not directly or indirectly
paid, offered, or promised to pay,
paid, offered, or promised to pay,
contributed, nor promised to contribute
contributed, or promised to contribute
any money or valuable thing,
any money or valuable thing,
or promised such to any public official
or promised statute, any public official
or employee as a reward
or employee as a reward
for the giving or withholding a vote
for giving or withholding a vote,
to secure my appointment
secure my appointment,
and further affirm neither I
further that I,
nor any company,
any company,
association, or corporation
association, or corporation,
of which I am an officer or principal
which I am an officer or principal,
will act as a supplier of services or goods,
will act as a supplier of
nor bid or negotiate
or bid or negotiate
to supply services or goods
to supply services and goods
for this institution or for the county of Dallas, Texas,
for this institution or for the county of Dallas, Texas,
except as shall be consistent
except as shall be consistent
with the policies of Dallas County,
with the policies of Dallas County.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, and congratulations. Did Michael step out?
No, he's right here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Floor is yours, Michael.
So topics for discussion, we wanted to.
Michael, just a section, if I may, I just want to place on the record that, by being appointed to serve on CEAC, we are defined by the Texas Government Code as public officials.
So I think our first order of business was a review of bylaws and meeting schedule. So if you'd like, Eric, I can lead this discussion.
That'd be fine, Michael.
Okay, great. So, for those of you who participated before, you know that we never had bylaws. And so we looked at that and we thought, well, that's for an organization this important, we should probably have some bylaws. So the administration and myself, we drew some up, we presented them to Commissioners Court, and they approved them, and made some modifications and approved them recently. So you now have that copy of the bylaws. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to peruse them, but I mean, they're pretty basic. But there's a couple things that I wanted to just point out as far as order of business. And first one being Article 6, Officers and Duties, it's appointment of secretary. And I believe the bylaws give you, as a committee, you may appoint the secretary if you find a volunteer that wants to do that. If not, we have Esmeralda from my staff that's currently taking notes, but if you'd like to appoint the secretary, you're entitled to do so.
I put it to the floor. Any volunteers?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that for practicality, we have the authority to appoint, in this case, Esmeralda as our secretary. It does not have to be a CEAC member as I read it, so.
Okay, would anyone else like to volunteer?
I've not seen any hands since you can't have visibility of the room.
Camila Bourdeau? Is that a hand raised to volunteer to?
Volunteer, I was wondering if is that in the form of a motion, or is that second on that if there is a motion?
That was a question to see if there was anybody who from the CEAC committee wanted to volunteer, I believe. And at present, I believe Camila is maintaining that she would be willing to be voted upon to see if she would be secretary. Is there anybody else who'd be interested in running for secretary? If not, then I think we can take it to a vote. Will anybody move to have Camila Bourdeau appointed as secretary?
Sorry. I didn't, I think someone
Well, I would move that Camila Bourdeau be voted upon to be secretary of our CEAC committee for this year. Is there any second?
I don't know if you heard that. There was a second.
There was a second. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, I do have a question. Secretary means that they would be at all the CEAC committees, but that does not pertain to any subcommittees that we might get. That would be a separate secretary.
That is correct. That is correct. Any other discussion?
Eric, I want to just ask, because I'm seeing some hands. I don't know how well you can see on
Yeah.
those hands, or do you want people to verbally, if they've got something to say?
Yeah, if anybody else has anything to say, I'm so sorry, guys. I got one eye and it's a small screen and I'm looking at you guys. If there's any other further discussion or if there's any other individual who wants to run for secretary, let us know. Let us know now. This is for the year. Yes, ma'am. You got a hand up in the front.
The discussion. So right now we're considering a secretary, which will be either Elaine, Tess, who's.
No, not me.
sorry.
Camila?
Camila.
Yeah.
Camila. Joe? Yes. Camila is online.
And she's online. She's virtual.
She's also a new member like we are today. Or the other option is, which I remember was Ms. Esmeralda, who automatically already keeps minutes for official meetings. Is that correct?
That is not on the table. Esmeralda
Excuse me,
is
Eric.
currently on the table.
Excuse me, Eric. Camila, you can unmute yourself now. I mean, everybody has been released by the host to unmute themselves who's viewed virtual.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, I'm just volunteering, but if anybody else is also volunteering, then of course we can discuss until we select somebody.
Yes, at present, it's a discussion on whether Camila Bourdeau should be appointed the secretary. We'll have a vote after this discussion.
Candidates, Camila and.
At present, there's no other person up. If Camila does not get the requisite votes, then we can go to Esmeralda.
I move that we appoint her secretary by acclamation.
Second? Any further discussion? Okay, we're going to go ahead and take the vote that Camila Bourdeau be appointed the secretary for this next annual session. You vote in the affirmative with the raising of the hands. Then I can't count, so if you could, Michael, just count the number of votes.
See 4 hands.
Full in line.
Oh, sorry.
I see 4 online.
You might note that the people that have their video turned off aren't able to be seen of whether they're voting or not.
Oh. So we've got 4 online, and then how many in the room, Michael?
4.
So that's 8. It's a majority. Is that what we're looking at?
Correct.
If so, then the motion carries. Camila Bourdeau will be our secretary. And-
Still need to call for opposed?
I'm sorry, opposed.
See 4 hands.
Motion carries. Camila Bourdeau is the secretary for this next year. Back to you, Michael.
Okay. The other section I wanted to point to was Article 5, committee, sitting with subcommittee. My understanding is in the so you're welcome to continue that subcommittee. I can tell you that one of the things that we want to do is to really have this group work to be a true advisory group. And instead of focusing your time on complaints, we want to have you forward focused and really help us avoid complaints. And so, and if you choose to keep that subcommittee for complaints, our intent is to not get that big fat book full of complaints in paper, but to have summary information that points you in a better direction for, looking for cause and effect, rather than just simply going through in detail. So I don't know if there's any discussion on that or not. Back to you, Eric.
Mr. Chair, if we'll probably need to consider continuing a subcommittee for complaints, even though staff work may be done when it's rolled up. There would need to be, approval or rejection of a recommendation for removal, probably through that subcommittee and through the committee of a whole before it's presented to Commissioners Court for their consideration. So we appreciate that the staff would roll up a lot of the work that we'd had to labor with before, but I think we're still going to need an approval or recommendation protocol. So.
Any further discussion or queries regarding the bylaws that have been presented to us?
Wanted to go ahead and talk about Article 7 meeting. Article 7, it says there shall be quarterly meetings. So we'd like to, maybe get an outline, maybe when you would like to meet. So we put a suggested, and certainly just a suggestion, to meet in December, February, June, September, and December, along that schedule. So back to you.
Suggestion is in here. Where?
On your screen?
Is it on the
Yeah.
agenda?
It's not on the.
Oh.
Your PowerPoint.
And Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that it's the spirit of the Commissioners Court that they intend to try enforce or attempt to enforce attendance criteria for CEAC. So is that your understanding, Michael? Okay.
That's what we saw in the bylaws, yeah. Is there any additional discussion, questions regarding the suggested scheduling with respect to quarterly meetings?
Question? On the setting of the actual date, does it just have December, would we set that as a board before, or is that something that staff would do? How is that?
I think it would probably be helpful. My suggestion would be, you guys can vote on it, would be at the end of every meeting, setting the date for the next meeting. But we know, generally speaking, the months. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, so the next one would be in December if we decide to follow this
Correct.
schedule.
Any additional discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Michael, is it your intent perhaps to be briefing CEAC before and after elections? And that'll drive part of the schedule, will it not?
That is correct. And looking at this schedule, we kind of thought that fit into that mold.
If there's a need for a meeting aside with this schedule, would that be just set by the chairman? I think I saw that in the bylaws. I guess that would be the procedure for that.
Yes, I believe that committee chair or myself, I can ask for a meeting. Ask the chair to set one.
No further questions.
Or our chair could ask you, right? You would ask him, he would ask. Section 2, it's under section 2 and section 1 meeting. To explain the section.
Got a hand up, Michael? Yes, ma'am.
Question is, I was trying to raise my hand already, and it's probably more to Michael, to you. Any guidance in terms of additional committees that we should take under advisement, given your expertise and experience in elections, that we need to think about, right? Yes, you've got the complaints piece of it, et cetera, but what other key things should we be homing in on?
That is a great question. Really good question. And because, along those lines, I would think, I've always thought there should be bilingual subcommittee. I've thought there should potentially be a voter registration outreach subcommittee, potentially. And then others as they may, for instance, if we have to evaluate election equipment, that sort of thing, new major purchase. So I think that the subcommittees don't necessarily have to be set, now. They could be set at any time. But great question.
And then follow up to that, at what point are we going to start back engaging with the vote center advisory committee, and will they overlap in any form or fashion to what we've got kind of already outlined from a meeting?
Another great question.
So I get 2 stars for that, right?
So this is jumping ahead, but that's okay. The Vote Center Advisory Committee met in summer of 2019. It was set to meet again in the summer of 2021 after a 2-year period of using the established vote centers. But when we went to Commissioner's Court to re-up that committee, because of the special sessions of the legislature and because of redistricting, they decided to postpone bringing that committee back together. So I'm assuming that committee will probably get reestablished in probably late November.
Eric Lawrence Weiner, I'm just wondering if it helps the process if there were a subcommittee to review like election judges and alternates before those lists are presented to Commissioner's Court for their approval, if that would help the process or not. So.
Yes, I think that'd definitely be helpful.
Well, it's also presented to they're the ones that go through, suggest or.
The list actually comes from the parties
Right.
to Commissioner's Court for their approval.
Right.
So it would be, I would suggest that this group probably doesn't have the authority to intervene, but I would imagine that the parties would probably welcome.
As a courtesy, to facilitate Commissioner's Court approval. So.
And I think we're definitely going to need to have an informal back and forth with respect to new commissioner or new things that we're talking about with respect to committees. Certainly the new laws that have been passed, how they're going to apply, how they're going to relate to what we're doing here, how we can be helpful to the elections department. Those are definitely things that we'll want to educate ourselves on, and of course create committees to kind of deal with and work with Mr. Scarpello in making those things as easily transferable as possible into the new laws that we have coming down.
The next thing that I wanted to bring up was communications between meetings. And we thought about putting together a team site where we could put out documents, et cetera, and we could have conversations, et cetera. But talking to our attorneys, that may be problematic because of Open Meeting Act, and that might be considered a meeting.
You can't have a quorum in an ad hoc meeting, so.
So we'll try to we'll brainstorm about how best to communicate with you between meetings. Talk once a quarter.
So I noticed that any subcommittees have to be exact, and that also when the complaint committee meets or the equipment committee or any of those And how does that work if we're meeting virtually or we're meeting off-site, or do we have to meet here? I understand we can post it on the county website, but so the public can see or come or.
Yeah, and if the subcommittees want to meet, our office will help arrange those online meetings through the county's normal procedures, just like this meeting today. The other thing I wanted to mention is, so as far as meetings go, tours of facilities. My understanding is that this committee didn't have an open door to see all of the activities of this building. And I say that won't be the case. Any member would always welcome any of our activities. Welcome that. So I think the more you know about the way we do business, the better it is for you to know.
So just for clarity, how would you recognize our standing to observe operations as being CEAC committee members? How would that be formalized? We brought up the issue of credentials in the past, and it wasn't looked upon favorably in the past, but you may take a different perspective on that.
We're an open book to anybody in the public, especially to a committee that's sole purpose is to advise us.
And the fact that we are public officials as well, not just, quote, visitors, if you will.
Two things that we need to consider. I mean, too many people, and I don't know those people off the top of my head, so that it's not considered a meeting. So we have to be conscious. We will talk with the DA's office about it.
Yeah, and there's other, like, personally identifiable information, access or viewing to that would be another common concern. So. We should not be perceived as visitors as opposed to being considered as being allowed to be here. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, but I mean, you're honored guests. So Eric, that's all I had for the bylaws, but I should throw it back to you if anybody has any other discussions about the bylaws.
Yeah, are there any other questions about the bylaws?
just one observation, there has been ambiguity with regard to the title of this organization, and if we can uniformly recognize that the citizen and election are each singular, any instance where they're not is an error. So
yeah, you're correct. So
Questions. I haven't had opportunity to read. It doesn't mean that we can't. We're not done asking questions today with this 15 minutes.
I'll talk to Eric about that.
Did you hear me, Jared? So this is Elaine Campbell. My question is, if we have, because we did just get last night, so I know I myself am still reviewing it. So if we have questions while we're reviewing it in detail, we're not saying that now there's no opportunity for additional questions. Are we?
Absolutely not. Currently, the version, of course, of the bylaws that passed the commissioners court, but we can certainly have discussion regarding what they're all about, what they may mean, perhaps interpretation. We can ask informationally in terms of what it is they meant, if need be. But that certainly can become part of an additional agenda item in future meetings. But definitely, this was kind of off in terms of how quickly we received them and the notification kind of given. This hopefully won't happen, again, and we'll be a little bit more, have more of an opportunity to be prepared to address those things. But yeah, this is just currently what we're discussing now. But we're not looking for modification currently in this meeting. It's more of an explanation of what's happened or what they are and what they're all about.
And I think I've recognized in looking at this version that was given to you, I believe this is not the version that was approved by the Commissioners Court, Esmeralda. So I think this, because we had lots of versions, I think this is an old version.
Yeah, there was a comment version that circulated, so this may or may not be that. So.
Yeah.
So we may very well call a special meeting before December. But it'll certainly be something that we can talk about. Okay, any additional discussion with respect to the bylaws for this evening? If not, our next topic for discussion is our mission, vision, and values. And Michael, if you want to go ahead and begin with that.
You bet. So right now we have a mission statement, but we don't have a vision or values. And the county as a whole is focusing on, building its own mission, vision, and values, as well as OKRs, objectives and key results. And so we're kind of formalizing everything as a county, and so we want to formalize everything as an organization because it helps us focus. And so I wanted to, today, maybe just start to plant the seeds of thinking about maybe for our future meeting of developing formal vision, mission, and values. And so having said that, a vision statement, I've got a few definitions here. A vision statement is a future-oriented declaration of the organization's purpose. So while the mission statement lays out the organization's purpose for being, the vision statement says, based on that purpose, this is what we want to become. Or another definition is basically, where's the organization going? As opposed to a mission statement communicates the organization's reason for being and how it aims to serve its key stakeholders. A second, and if you go to the internet, you'll see all kinds of definitions, but here's another one: what the organization will do to get there. Where's the organization going, and what will it do to get there? And of course, the values are fairly self-explanatory: the beliefs of an individual or a group, or an organization in which they're emotionally invested, or how the organization directly affects the people towards common goals. So I mentioned the county, so here's kind of the way they all relate, so that you have your mission statement, who we are, what we value, that's your mission and your values. Your vision statement, what we want to become. And then your strategy gets down into what we call our tactical plan. Here's kind of our grand things that we want to do, and we're going to talk about those later. And then our goals and objectives, those are our measurables. What do we measure to tell our success? And so here's an example of a vision, mission, and values for the Electoral Commission of South Africa. So their vision is to be the preeminent leader in electoral democracy. Their mission statement is they want to be an independent constitutional body which manages free and fair elections of legislative bodies and institutions through the participation of citizens, political parties, civil society, in deepening electoral democracy. So that's what they came up with. And then their values: impartiality, integrity, accountability, transparency, participation, responsiveness, and respect. So that's kind of what we want to develop, something, a vision, mission, and values. Because as you see right now, and that's kind of typical, this is what you would normally see in organizations today. A very short vision statement, a little bit longer, more detailed mission statement, and then values. What we have today is this is our current mission statement, which is rather long and rather detailed. Now, you may, what I'm asking you guys for is probably in the next meeting is a recommendation, what you would say to be our mission, vision, and values. Because then we will formalize that, take that, put it in front of Commissioners Court, put their stamp of approval on it. So I don't know if you guys have this in your handout. As you can see, I don't want to read through this current mission statement, but it's really not the direction that we want. Here's just a few. I just went on the internet real quick. Here's a few mission statements from other counties. You know, Placer County, California, Denver County. These are ones I'm familiar with because I made them. A couple of them. Orange County, San Bernardino County. You get the idea. And so I think unless you would want to do something with this today or comment, discussions, et cetera, I want you guys to kind of think about this over the next couple months and maybe have a more deeper discussion in December. Eric, do you?
Yeah, we have a real quick question from the chat, which I think is relevant and I think is important, especially for our newer members. Michael, when we're talking about mission, vision, and values, a lot of this that we're kind of seeing is this from the elections department? Is it CEAC? Is it the combination of both? How do you see it in terms of that presentation and what you want to hear back from us?
This would be the mission, vision, and values for the elections department. So it's as you guys are advising us on what you'd like to see out of the department. So it would be your advice on those statements.
Okay. I'd like just a really quick discussion. If anybody has any questions about that and what they see as, what CEAC is and what it is doing in terms of a vision or mission, it should be to support our elections department. If anybody sees that or sees it a little bit differently, I'd love to have that brief discussion if you want to comment or make suggestion at present.
I see a hand up.
Just for the clarification here, as I understand it, what you're telling us is that you have no less commitment to these objectives that we have listed outlined here. But you want a mission statement that would be 1 or 2 sentences long that would allow us to somehow condense all of these or maintain your commitment to these statements, these objectives, but also state it in a way that the average citizen can understand that we are more specifically this mission.
I think that's a good summary. It's just reformatting in a more traditional way.
I think what you've got close in here is objective. Mission statement needs to be 1 or 2 sentences. That's close.
Correct.
This is Vip Castillo. I think it's a great idea to when we do think about what we want it to look like for the next meeting, discuss it. Do you want us to submit it prior to? Do you want us just to bring the idea back?
Eric, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, what do you guys think? What do you, and I'm so sorry, who's asking the question?
This was Faith.
What do you think?
This is Elaine. I know you can't see me, so I was raising my hand, but I don't think you can see us. But this is Elaine Campbell. And I could be wrong, but would it be a correct statement though that we would need to discuss it in public, in a public meeting forum, in order to change it and then vote on it? Is that correct?
Yes.
Input does not have to be in a public forum, but if you're moving towards any decision, that's when you get into open meetings.
Changing it and making a decision.
So Eric, we might have an opportunity to submit comments, questions, concerns to you, through email and let you reflect on those, or it's just, that would be one strategy.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about if we have ideas of what it should look like before. Then if we submit it, when we collectively meet, it'll be an easier process.
Oh, I
to figure
see.
out what we want it to look like. So you can look at it ahead and be like, oh, so maybe that should be added with mine, and then you can submit yours, just so we can look at it beforehand. That's all.
And Eric, I would volunteer. I mean, if you would like, they can submit those to you and to my office simultaneously, and we can collate, put those ideas to present to you guys next meeting. There's a question there.
Just because this is my first meeting and this is Renato de los Santos asking again. What point, if I want to reach out to another member of the committee and say, hey, I've got these ideas, at what point do I need to be careful about violating the open meeting act? Is there a number of members that I can't talk to or what's the level there?
There is, I'm pretty sure one-on-one's not a problem, but there is a threshold where it's a problem. And so we will look that up and we will pass that to you guys.
Essentially, at such time that the discussion reaches a quorum,
Right.
You would be violating open meetings if you're not conducting such.
Essentially, what would be a quorum?
Yeah, and I'm not sure of the exact number, if it's quorum or not.
Do we not have isn't that built into the
It may be.
bylaws?
It may be, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not fully versed in Texas Open Meetings Act. So that's what we will consult with the DA's office, Civil Division, and pass that information.
There's a lot of public officials that have a problem with it, complying with that too. So.
I think that's correct, and anything that takes or back would be the.
Eric, you got a Ms. Coca as well?
I didn't hear a word she just said. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Levatta Levels.
Hey, Lavella.
Levatta
I'm so sorry.
Levels.
Miss Levels, I'm so sorry.
L's, I know. On page 7 of the bylaws that we received, assuming that this is the accurate copy of the bylaws, it indicates that a quorum is a majority. So therefore, a simple majority of a committee of 13 will be set.
That should be right. That should be correct. But again, I don't think there'd be any harm with Mr. Scarpella checking in with the DA's office just to make confirmation of that. That's why, of course, all of our committees are going to be less than that, substantially smaller than that, and they'll be reporting to the greater group. But that would be my understanding that 7 would create a quorum.
Also, if you meet with intent to make decisions and you're less than a quorum, you could also be violating open meetings. So.
We might just be brief. Yes, ma'am, in the front.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ana Coca. Just a suggestion, if it's possible, because this is important, mission, vision, it can drive the whole committee's work for our next years together. Suggestion is sometimes there are teams of professionals who can meet us here, for example, at our next meeting in December and spend just a little bit of time. And they do a good job of putting us together and basically guiding and leading this mission and vision and work. And they're professionals who kind of make us accountable and get it done within those 30 minutes or 40 minutes allotted. If it's possible, because they are professionals who can kind of help us, they usually put the chart papers around the bill, and they can help us guide us. Because this is an important part of the mission, vision, and the goals and objectives of where we want to go, where are we heading.
Eric, I'll just mention that the county does have a facilitator that does that now for the counties, and we can look into whether or not we can borrow them. So all I can do is ask.
Sounds good.
That nobody has to pay for.
There's a hand up in back.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Eric. John Yours, how are you?
Hey, John.
Listen, just to not be there, of course, it is. Probably needs to verify and clarify exactly what, and I love what you do with the full thing, that's perfect, that's great, but just to verify what vision means, mission means, and value means, and just what those terms actually mean really quickly. And the way that people are going to read these and understand them, it's probably some kind of graphic definition. Bullets are, and I'm around kids already, they don't read me, but they'll look at a picture. So if it's really short and in some way graphically depicted, maybe just have a rule that you have a certain number of bullets, because if you're typing everything, you're not doing nothing. So we may have to agree on that too. It's gonna have to be limited. It won't cover every single thing. None of this stuff will. So I like the word objective in my background. But, definition and values, that's all great. It's just,
You resolve.
we need to have a rule. But probably need to have an understanding that we're not going to try to cover everything that could possibly happen with meteorite or the tsunami and Dow, and we can't cover everything. But we have to have an idea of what we want to do and know that there's a limited, gotta be something that is easy to read, easy to see, and easy to remember. So I have a couple ideas. I'll give a few online, offline. Somebody that knows speak what I'm talking about. What our objectives.
I hear you, John.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
So the next section, we were going to talk about our organizational infrastructure and our 2021 activities. And so I want to start with, for some of you, we met back in February, but some of you are new and some of you may not remember back in February when we discussed, because it was an online meeting. So I was just going to tell you a little bit about my background. I'm an attorney. I'm also a certified elections and registration administrator. I started in this business in 2000 in Douglas County, Nebraska. Was there from 2000 to 2007. I was the deputy election commissioner and then the elections manager. Then I moved to Denver County in 2007. Was there through 2011. I kind of went there after Denver had its Florida moment, I say. They had a disastrous election in 2006. They fired everybody, and we had to rebuild the organization from the ground up in less than a year prior to the biggest presidential election ever up to that point. And so that gave me an opportunity to kind of approach elections a little bit differently and think about how to organize an elections office. And so we did that, and we're very successful, award-winning type of things in Denver. And then so in 2011, I moved to San Bernardino County. I wanted a warmer climate and a much bigger jurisdiction, 12th largest in the country, and the largest area in the country. It goes all the way from Los Angeles to basically up to Las Vegas. And it was there from 2011 to 2018. Then I went into the private sector for Runbeck Election Services. I helped them acquire a voter registration company, and I was the vice president of election management systems. And then last year, December 2020, got back to what I love, and that's running elections on a day-to-day basis. So my general philosophy, in all the locations I've been in, I've promoted sweeping change, innovation, and modernization. So I'm kind of known as a change agent. I rebuild organizations to one that perform at the highest level, and I kind of use a form of business process engineering where the organization's employees operate in a team environment. Employees are empowered to own all of their functions. Instead of me telling them what to do, we empower them to make the plans, and we work with them, we team build with them, and follow through with implementation and analysis afterwards. Really focus on business processes and procedures, and make sure that they're documented, because what we find in the elections business is, or any business, frankly, if you have too much institutional knowledge in someone's head and then they leave, you're in trouble. So we really document, and so that's a big part of my philosophy. Statistics and analytics are really, really important. In San Bernardino, I built an analytics department, and I was asked to speak by the National EAC, Election Assistance Commission, in Washington, D.C. a couple times to try to train other departments on how to bring more analytics and beating up the numbers to try to be more efficient and effective. And so that's a big part of our approach. Internal and external communications is vitally important. That's why I talked about, you'll hear me saying this all the time, being kind of radically transparent, open up all the doors and let people in and really communicate with them. and then to aggressively use technology. Cutting edge, but maybe not bleeding edge when it comes to technology. But my offices have always been very much technology leaders. In fact, on my office shelf, there's 2 national awards for the use of technology, just very aggressive use of technology. More things about my philosophy. So when we talked about values, so my values, externally, it's integrity, impartiality, transparency, service. We really want our customers to recognize those things in us. And for, internally for our employees, ownership of their tasks, excellence, not just, it's good enough for government work, but excellence, change, thinking outside the box, really driving change, doing things differently, and of course, fiscal responsibility. I always ask people every day, would you spend, if this were your money, would you spend it that way? And many times I'll get the answer like, heck no. And I said, well, why are we spending the government's money that way? So I kind of have this saying, faster elections, fair, accurate, secure, transparent, efficient, reliable elections. That's helps me remind, it's a little acronym for me to, this is kind of our goal. So when I got here, I had to analyze this organization to find out how much work we needed to do. So I went to several sources. I talked to county officials. I reviewed IT department had a report after the 2020 presidential election. It's pretty detailed. The auditor's office had an internal control review that they wrote based on 2020. We got it, received it in February of this year. Met with external stakeholders, a lot of meeting with folks, internal interviews with all of our staff members, and then kind of looking at best practices, how things are done other places. And then just based on my own experience through 22 years of conducting elections. And that's kind of how I decided, the general direction of where we wanted to go. Of course, I'm open to suggestions, and that's why we have this group to help me better navigate the waters here in Texas. So after, listening to people and formulating our plans, it's like, okay, now what are we going to do? So one of the things I really talk about is infrastructure. You have to have a very solid foundation to build your organization. So what is infrastructure? So it's the underlying foundation, including your facilities, equipment, systems, services, technology, hardware, software, processes, procedures, and when people think of organizational structure, it's their organizational design, their org chart. So it's all those things combined. Without the other is no good. And so, so as far as the organizational infrastructure, we started that in last year, and people ask me, well, when will you be done? The answer is never. We'll never be done because we're constantly looking to make things better and rebuild the organization and the organizational infrastructure. As far as the org chart, the organizational design, we put a map of that organization back in March, and we're nearing completion on that, and that's, putting the right people in the proper places within the organization. So this was the previous organizational chart, and what we found is there was a lot of people on islands. I'll talk about the issues with the previous organization chart in the way the organization was operating. So what we found, it was a very top-driven down organization with siloed employees. Some employees had no mid-level managers, no fellow team members. Employees they were kind of sitting back waiting to be told what to do. They weren't owning their responsibilities. And so there was underperformance in some critical tasks and apathy by some employees, not all, but by some. The span of control for the employees was too broad, and the responsibilities overlapped. So we had multiple people doing the same thing. And so that it was inefficient, and there was some confusion. We had ineffective vertical and horizontal communications within the department. And then we had very few documented processes and procedures. resulting in no uniformity between those, you know, of the ones that we did have, we didn't document them in a uniform way. And we rarely used statistics. It was pretty much based on averages in how we were operating. So what we did is I looked at all that and I said, okay, we need to reorganize. So this is our new org chart. And I don't know how well you got the big version of it, so I think you can see it pretty well. And I call this a functional org chart. And what you'll see is we're organized into 3 divisions, or multiple divisions. We got our technology division, our operations division, our communications department, and our administration department. And so starting from the right, the technology division is a new one. This is because we have $25 million worth of equipment, but previously we had like one technology guy. And so what we decided is we got $25 million worth of equipment. We better have some technology people to help us manage it. And so we partnered with the CIO, Melissa Kraft, and she hired Stanley Suffolk, and he is an assistant chief, reporting to her directly in a dotted line to me. So he is stationed in our office here, and he manages our technology. And so on the far right-hand side, we're hiring some new staff members, senior programmer, and a business analyst, and that's because we buy a lot of technology here, but we don't, we just buy, but that technology doesn't work together very well. And so our programmer and our business analysts are going to try to tie those pieces of software better together, as well as building our own internal software to help us, operate in a better fashion. There's a question.
Relative to the technology, what's the status of AT&T building acquisition as far as you're being able to adapt that to what you need to do to implement your organization?
Great question. Can I hold it? That's coming up.
Okay.
Can we hold that?
Sure.
There's a technology application support analyst. We got lots and lots of software, but we don't necessarily know how to use it. So that's basically a trainer to help us, utilize our software in a better fashion. We've expanded with our GIS. GIS is a big growth area for us because that helps us with our analytics. So we hired another person over there. We formed an election hardware group to help us better manage the equipment. That's what that group is. And then Central Count is the same group we've had before. We have our operations division, and that's headed by our deputy elections administrator, Melissa Kuba. And so I would mention that Melissa's the deputy of the entire organization, but she's also the head of that division. And Melissa's back there. And Melissa, why don't you stand up and say hi, so you guys get to know her. Melissa's an incredibly talented person. Worked with Melissa in the past. She most recently was the chief deputy of Riverside County, California, and Riverside County is the 10th largest in the country. I think 2.2 million registered voters, or 1.2 million registered voters, as opposed to our 1.4. A very large jurisdiction, and she did some tremendous things there. Nobody knows spreadsheets like Melissa. It's amazing. And so she's working with those 5 departments: voter registration, training, mail ballots, voting sites, and logistics. And then we've got our communications department. We are currently advertising for a new communications manager. If you know anyone, especially someone who's bilingual, we would love to get a talented person into that position. That posting's out there right now, and we've been conducting interviews for it. That person oversees 4 other people. But this is a big growth area for us because communications is really important. And I can tell you this, having been in Denver in 2008, Denver was a purple state at the time. Denver, we had the presidential campaign's attorneys in our office almost every day. And we had the media scrutiny. And so that media scrutiny and that, scrutiny in general is coming to Texas, I think, in my opinion. So we need to be ready for that, and we need to be able to communicate well with the public for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about that. And then our admin department, we hired a new, very experienced admin manager, Beatrice Kirk, and Beatrice back there. Beatrice, you want to stand up? Dee Dee? And Dee Dee was here for 10 years, many years ago, back till 2011, and then she went off to another county department, and I brought her back to help us out. She knows the county departments inside and out, and she's bringing this admin team together to help us, because this was an area, for instance, there was a lot of people siloed and were not working together well. So she's helping us catch up on a lot of the work in that area. So that's just kind of an overview of the department, the org chart. So what our goal is to have not a bottom or top-down department, but a bottom-up driven organization with a team environment. All employees have a manager who collaborate with them and supervise their activities. All employees are in a team. They have team members that can serve as a backup, because that was a big problem for us last year when we had people out on COVID. Things fell apart when we had some key people missing. All employees are given ownership of a function. You'll notice on that org chart, and I call it the functional org chart. So in the italicized wording, this is what they own. They own the planning, they own everything about it. And they're not the only people who work on it, but they own it. And what that really does is there's a lot more buy-in from your employees when you have that approach. And then, so the result is superior performance of tasks. The span of control of our employees is limited, so we don't have so much overlap. We don't want to be jacks of all trades and masters of none. So we really try to have people focus in a smaller area. We have, when it comes to communications, we have regular team meetings and collective team notes on a regular basis, and anybody can refer to those notes. Anybody can. So if you miss a meeting, you know what took place. When you have a meeting, you know who's supposed to do what by when, et cetera. So it's a really important part of our structure. We are working on uniform documented processes. I can tell you that in my last county, we had a really cool application where it was called eDate. It was election deadline and assignment and task engine, and it was like 2,650 election tasks to conduct a presidential election, and then the corresponding processes that go with it. And so that was all automated and electronic, built on an electronic platform that we build internally. That's the direction we're going in. We got a long way to get there. That's the direction we're going in when it comes to processes and procedures. And then mandated use of statistics and measurements. I always tell my staff, you should have paid attention in math class, because we're going to be doing a lot of math here. And in fact, we got one of the positions on the org chart is a new elections analyst. He's hired, and that person's going to be starting in so where that person really beats up the numbers and works with all the different departments to help them work their numbers. So it's a mathematics expert. So I kind of talked about the organization. So we've got 51 budgeted positions, 5 IT budgeted positions. So of those 56 people, we've got 9 new employees. We got 13 vacancies, and we've got 11 positions that are under review by our HR for reclassifications, et cetera. So we're still a very new organization, a little raw, and so between the new positions and the vacancies. But that's okay, because we're going to bring in some new blood, and we're going to work with our already dedicated employees here. Part-time employee, we also employ a lot of part-time, temporary, and contract employees. And the numbers are to be determined, because we're becoming more lean and mean now, rather than having loads and loads of people. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to keep moving because I got a lot to cover. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions thus far while you take a drink? Okay, I'll move on. So we conducted the joint elections, and we got an election this summer, and then we got an upcoming election in November. So the May joint election was a fairly large one. It was 32 participant, 18 jurisdictions, 1.3 million registered voters. So basically the whole county. And then the June runoff was a much smaller election, 580,000 registered voters and only a lot fewer polling places. So going into those elections, I got here in December, and we put that organization together, but we didn't have the people. I mean, the organization was there and we were operating out of it, but we had, probably 20, with a lot more vacancies back then even. So our goal was to have the new organizational structure, new personnel, everything, but that was not realistic. So the realistic goal was to implement new organizational structure, but with knowing that we had limited managers and personnel, and then using those sources I talked about earlier that we talked to analyze the organization, try to find our holes. Where are we most vulnerable going into those elections? Try to plug those holes. So we developed 16 processes going into the May election where we said, let's redo this. And then between the two elections, between May and June, we had 7 more processes that we developed. So after the elections, we had a very detailed May post-election review. So that's in your handout. I believe you have that. That's this document right here. And so the original document was written, and then after the June election, we updated it. In the June election, and that's what you see in blue. And I'm just going to very quickly go through a few of those. I got to stop.
The handouts, are they in here?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so within that, there's that document. Just point out a few highlights. So I talked about those 16 modifications. I'm going to skip number 1, 2. We're going to talk about that later. But I'd skip to number 5. One of the things we did is we came up with a new VIP hotline. I can tell you that we got a lot of phone numbers, and so we pass out these phone numbers, and we have 10, 12, 14 numbers that people were calling on election day, including, so everyone's calling people's cell phones, we're missing calls. So we really looked at our hotlines and we said, let's create a new one called a VIP hotline. That's for elected officials, political parties, candidates, the media, probably you guys would be a part of that VIP hotline. So that when on election day, or even an election season, the month before an election, during early voting, et cetera, when you need to get a hold of someone, there's always someone answering that hotline. That worked out really well. The other one, modification 6, we revised our judge hotline. So we have basically 3 hotlines. We have a judge hotline for our workers. We have a voter hotline for voters, and then we have a VIP hotline for candidates, et cetera. So we did some new, we hired a new customer relations coordinator. We really kind of took a look at how we never had anyone in charge of our hotlines before, or our phone bank. So we're really redoing that whole setup on our hotlines and making tremendous progress. We got a young lady that's just doing a fantastic job in the area. In our communications department. On modification number 7, we wanted to revise our training completely, but we didn't have time. So we made some minor modifications to our training to try to make it a little bit better. And I'll talk a little bit more about training. But anyway, that helped a little bit. Our long-term plan, which is we're in the middle of right now, is to completely rebuild our training from A to Z. Modification number 8, our mail ballot department, we made major modification. I can tell you that we spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the November presidential election that we didn't have to. It was a paper-based process that was kind of, just antiquated. And so we went in there and we redid it, and it's an electronic process now, and it's basically an electronic way of gathering documents. When someone sends in an application, we scan it, we have it electronically, put that piece of paper away, file it away, send out the ballot. When the ballot comes back, we scan it, we have it, the signatures electronically. We look at them electronically now, rather than pushing carts of paper all around the building. So that's going to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future in a larger election. So that was a big success for us.
Excuse me, Michael, is it your intent to continue the signature verification committee participation process being mailed out?
The signature verification committee is the benefactor of that new process, because instead of them having pieces of paper and handling, all this paper and filing away and everything else, they're simply looking at a screen, seeing two signatures, saying yes, no, yes, no. So it's a very easy, it's a very lean group now. So modification number 9, we combined our early voting and our election day departments. We were managing people and places, basically for early voting, and managing people and places for election day. We said that was probably, and we were doing things differently in those two groups, and we said that doesn't make sense. Let's put those two groups together, modified that, and got all of our processes. We're doing everything the same now within those two groups. Modification number 10, how we distribute equipment. So in the past, and not only here, but in most places, frankly, you kind of do everything on averages. Well, average, here's going to be the projected turnout, and at every location, we're going to send 4 e-poll books and 9 express votes, voting machines. And what happens with that is you under-deploy and you over-deploy. So what we really try to do is use analytics to predict where people are going to vote, so that at some locations you might have 3 e-poll books and 5 express votes, and in other places you might have 7 e-poll books and 12 express votes, based on the historic turnout and projections. And so we'll get better and better at that every election as we have a better track record. But we did pretty well in those 2 elections. Modification number 11, we changed the role of our roving technicians. Before, we had technicians that were supposed to inspect what takes place at a polling place, and they were supposed to fix machinery too. They were jacks of all trade, masters of none. So what they ended up doing was not doing any inspecting, they were just fixing. So we broke that into 2 pieces. We have deployed technicians, TV repairmen basically, to fix things when things go bad, and then we have inspectors that actually go to polling places and inspect, because what they do is they prevent problems, because they work with poll workers to say, and they got a checklist and they say, are you doing this right, et cetera. Question?
I just want to express that, Michael, I do have a concern about using the title of inspectors for these essentially election judge coaches, because that takes on a legalistic, and somewhat threatening title, and if we could seek a different, softer title, I think that would help all around.
I've called them field representatives in the past. They were my eyes and ears in the field. We are open to any suggestions like that.
Because we deal with the issue of state inspectors and such that really do have some, legal authority. We're not trying to send ominous people to polling places.
That's a good point. And I can say that, one of my things about philosophy is all of our naming conventions, we have 5 names for everything, acronyms, this and that. And so one of my rules here, everyone knows it because they've heard me say it so many times, we have 1 name for everything, and that name should be meaningful. So inspectors seem like a pretty good name, but it may be a little too much, right?
And coach might be a little too corny and too
right.
Somewhere between coach and inspectors is perhaps where we'd like to be.
I got you. Modification number 12, the warehouse team. We've had a lot of issues with the delivery of equipment and supplies, and not having proper checklists. And just today, we spent a lot of time with our warehouse team working with checklists. We're loading up for the November election, and so we're really trying to get our warehouse team to make sure what we say is going to be delivered is delivered. Modification number 13, we make it really hard on judges. We had them bringing all kinds of equipment to the polling place. all kinds of equipment. And so what we basically did, the modification here was making the judges take so much. Our logistics department should be delivering, not, people shouldn't be carrying all this stuff with them. So we're getting to the point where right now they only have their shoulder bag and their e-poll books. We're working towards getting rid of the e-poll books so they don't have to take those either.
And really, one of the big issues that's changed significantly in technology is, electrical supply issues with polling sites, and the judges don't know or are not prepared. And used to be before, if you had one plug, you could get and go, but a lot more plugs required.
Yep.
And many of our locations just don't accommodate a lot of plugs. So.
Yep. So our central count area, we really relied on the vendor to do most of the work in central count. And our vendors, ES&S, and when they bring someone in, they charge $1,650 a day per person. And frankly, they go out and hire a bunch of temps to do a lot of that work. So we said, why are we paying them to do our work? We can do that work. So we're taking over a lot of their work, shifting away from the vendor towards us doing the work internally. And that's it's already saved us. I don't even know the numbers needed. It's a lot. 250 maybe for this election. And so in the future, that's going to continue to grow as we take over more of their work. Modification number 15.
And I guess additional comment. I think you've said that you want your people and the party's people to be essentially running central count rather than ES&S, which has kind of been what it has been, right?
Correct, absolutely. We should be in charge rather than the vendor be in charge. Modification number 15. This is one that kind of freaked me out a little bit, but when we bring back election results, there's a primary results USB stick, there's a backup results stick, and then there's paper ballots. So there's 3 different forms of ballots. We were bringing those all back in the same car. And so if that car got in a fiery crash or that person went to the bar or whatever it might be, the entire election was in jeopardy. So we said, that's not a good idea. So we left the backup sticks in the machines, and we brought the primary and the ballots with us to our locations. And but the only thing that did, though, it did delay our results by 20 to 30 minutes because instead of modeming results from the regional sites, we had to drive them in. Technicality is state law, I won't get into it, but we were forced to do that. So election results are a little bit later, but I don't really care about late results as much as I care about accurate results and not having to redo an entire election because I lost the USB stick. So the modification 16, it's just a matter of releasing results in a timely fashion. I was just last night when we were watching the stuff in California, people were, they reported 9:22 and 9:47, and you don't know what time they're going to release. And so I've been in those rooms when you're in campaigns you want to know when those results are coming. So we say when we're going to report on every half hour, and we do that. So that was kind of a modification. 17, I'm just going to skip over. That's more of the reorg stuff. So we had, having said all that, we made a lot of those changes, and we didn't I think I made 17 changes. I should have made 18. Because one of the ones we did not do, we did not look at a key piece of software that we use to manage our incoming tickets on election day. And that's from a vendor called Ask Ed, and it's a help desk management software. And, everyone thought that was all okay and we were good to go, and the vendor was giving us all the okay and it's good to go when it wasn't. And so what happened on election day then is as some phone calls were coming in for a few of our polling places, there's a ticket placed by our help desk. They place the ticket, and then the response team responds to those. And a couple of those tickets were misfiled. When those tickets were misfiled, they weren't acted upon. So problem at some of those polling places was not addressed in a timely fashion. So we had some of those opening issues. So that was in May. We fixed that going into June. And we took care of that. frankly, with one of that new employee I talked about. I think she had been hired like 2 days before the May election, and so, it was a,
Trial by fire.
By fire, right. So, just kind of scrolling down through here and looking through my highlights. Another issue we had related to that opening issues is there's this software that we use that monitors all of our e-poll books electronically, so we can, on our dashboard, we can see who's open. And that software, another vendor failure, didn't work. And so we fixed that. We worked with the vendor, held their feet to the fire, and we got that working. We got great cooperation from our IT department to help us with that. So now for the June election, we're monitoring, at every minute, we're seeing who's coming online, and those people who aren't coming online, by quarter till, we're like, are you guys set up? Are you ready to go? And so we took care of all those issues. There's a question.
So, you mentioned several instances of construct. So how are we in that in your evaluation?
We had my staff's probably laughing a little bit because we had a meeting today with our ES&S vendor, and I love vendors on the one hand, but on the other hand, they don't love me because I really am a high maintenance customer. And I tell my whole staff, we need to be high maintenance customers. When they make a promise, they got to deliver. And if they don't deliver, there's going to be a penalty. So, today that was the discussion with ES&S to say, this is in the contract. You got to deliver on this, an enhancement to the e-poll books. So we are pressing as hard as we can with those vendors. Of course, they got a lot of things on their plate too. I mean, there's a lot of change in the elections world. So we try to be understanding, but also high maintenance customers.
Maybe in our advisory, as one of this new technology is going out, and present, right, their, not just really their pitch, but the value proposition, so that we have some understanding around what type of services and things that they help support, right, and advising, right, towards that and understanding with your vendor spending, et cetera. I think that's important because these key things we're speaking about are huge when you think about elections.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
And on the poll opening issues, I felt very badly for you and your folks in the May election that so many of those, locations that had a problem getting going, I consider those operator error by the election judges. I mean, there's, you have to have access to the location, keys, whatever you need, and we know about the prior planning, that the acronym that goes with that, and
I will say this, yes and no, I agree with that, but I also disagree. I mean, our poll workers, we put them in a really difficult position because, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but we don't give them enough guidance. And so we're working on fixing what I call these kind of institutional issues to prevent problems rather than react to them. So we're working on that with, through our revising our processes, revising our infrastructure, et cetera. So I don't want to ever, throw our poll workers under the bus until, if and when we put the proper support and infrastructure in place. And if they still mess up, then it's a little bit more on them. But until then,
I've been doing about 30 years, so I'm willing to throw them under the bus. It's like, I don't think of anything but setting up the night before, because there's just too much to do with needing to be open at 7 a.m. and I'm not a morning person, so I'm mostly set to go for flipping some switches come 6 a.m. the next morning. So
I understand what Michael's saying though, because I was a new poll worker. However, I have an extensive project management background.
Yeah.
So I made my own project management. I was calling elections constantly. But exactly what Michael said, that's because I was doing that. But those kind of things, you should have the list of things already that wasn't there. There were more new poll workers when I was at training, they told me, than there ever had been in a long time. Apparently. I understand. So I understand what you're saying.
But is there not a rule that set up and ready to go night before? Is there not a rule? What's the question?
No, that's just a practice that a lot of our poll workers do.
That's a best practice, but if you don't do it, you're in trouble.
It should be required by the, in my opinion, by the judge, but it currently is not.
I can tell you, especially, that's my area. Talk about you like schools the night before, there could be a number of activities or issues or things going on campuses. And a lot of times, depending on the school they're using, is a gym. So you may be in conflict with athletic competitions or something going on. And so, and if that is a rule or whatever, she's going to have communication early so that everybody can plan. You can't do it the night before. I always make sure my facilities, we didn't plan the night before. But a precinct judge, on some occasions, they are not even notified until the week of, or 2 or 3 days at the last minute as an alternate judge. So things happen.
Yeah.
So I just don't believe, I believe most judges go the night before and set up. I do.
So speaking of judges, poll worker recruitment, this last elections being in May and June, really difficult to get people to work on a Saturday, especially. And that's even more problematic because we had, it was the largest election we've ever had. We had 432 polling locations as opposed to 348 2 years ago. So we had to have that many more poll workers. And that was because of a quirk in the law with this move to vote centers where we have to keep all these vote centers open, unfortunately, even if the turnout's expected to be low. We're working on that. We hope we might have some legislative issue, change or with the vote center advisory committee, maybe being able to condense down a little bit. But that'll be up to them.
And maybe this is a good time or not, but the last party primary, you had an example. I know for sure the Dallas County Republican Party chair said, I only want X number of polling places. And he was told no by your predecessor. The thing is, the parties own the elections, and to be told no is really problematic. I think they were trying to have all of the polling places available just for data accumulations, towards the evolution of the vote center process. But when you're asking for only 200 or 250 and you're force-fed 400 or whatever the number, that's not good.
And we're in discussions with the parties right now about the primaries. There's a lot of discussion going on, and we'll see how that goes. So poll worker recruitment, we want to partner with the parties to try to, instead of, we have this model in Texas where it's, the parties name the people and then we have everyone assigned and then the judges recruit their own people. So once again, it's kind of decentralized in a job that should be more centralized. So even though we can't do it officially, we're going to try to work with the parties to help them a little bit more, to do a little more recruitment, a little more outreach, and feed the parties with more workers to make their jobs a little bit easier. We had the same issues with temp workers. I don't know if you guys are having this issue in the private sector, but we can't get people to work. So we had that problem in May, and we're continuing to have that problem now to get people to help us as we bring temps in. Talk about training. We're in the middle of revising all of our training. Not only, it's not just the training, but the process. You got to reinvent the processes first, and then reinvent the training. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. We continue to work on logistics. I don't think there's any, the Ask Ed issue I already talked about. We fixed that. We're going to continue to work on that. And that's it for this document. So I'm going to pause here. Well, I got one more slide. I'm sorry. Let me re-share this PowerPoint, and I'll turn it back to Eric for a second. So how do we do in that election? So I just talked about the challenges of conducting the largest May election ever, all the challenges we just talked about. How did we do overall? When you look at, when I evaluate an election, so we had no ballot definition issues or counting issues, no communications issues, no mail ballot issues, no early voting issues. We had some uncontrollable personnel issues, couldn't get people to work. Some facility issues, couldn't get into buildings, things like that. Some logistics issues, some election hardware issues, handful of significant opening issues, and then at that I mentioned the significant help desk issues. The modifications that we made were successful. Those all worked. And then between the elections, we addressed the issues, the problems that we had between May and June. So I was pretty happy about that. So overall, the election was conducted efficiently in a low cost compared to previous elections, and we'll touch on that in a little while. So this upcoming election is a countywide election, constitutional election, all registered voters. We're required to at least attempt to use all of our vote centers right now, which is 468. So I think our number right now is like at 440 or something like that. And we're trying to finalize those last ones, the holdouts. So that number will be finalized here in the coming days. And then
that's kind of scary too, because it's very low turnout election, and
it's going to be a highly,
we're going to max out the vote centers.
Highly inefficient election. But here's what we do: we just had a meeting yesterday to finalize our projections. And so instead of sending just here's the standard amount of equipment we always send to an election, we're pretty lean. We send very low numbers to certain locations, higher numbers to other locations where we expect higher turnout. So that worked out pretty well for us in May, and we'll continue to do that to try to save. I'm going to pause right there, Eric, see if you have any questions before I move on to the next strategic and tactical plan.
Yeah, do we have any questions about organizational infrastructure or the slides that Michael just presented?
How are you, I know that, I mean, this is my first time obviously in this committee and joining. How are we getting the feedback?
You might have one question. Well, three quick things. Number one, you really paid attention, and this is awesome. This really is beautifully done. Just a couple quick. Like the May and the June was great. So if you have to kind of CE, that would really be helpful. If it's an online thing or something like that would be awesome for the judges and the poll workers, just so they remember, so they forgot, and then they, they can.
Right.
The last thing, the third thing is the poll worker recruitment issue. I've always thought that was a problem waiting to happen. But I just don't have time to recruit people, and I'm at school with a bunch of teenagers, and it's just. But when I make a phone call here, these folks always send me quality, awesome. I don't know where you get them from. I don't care, but they're always awesome. And they're just great young people. So that should be the standard. That's on time. So if we could just make that part of the regular process that we have to recruit, because somebody teaches you to recruit their own kids. But somebody's going to say something one day.
Great feedback. Okay, but by the way, I should mention one thing. One of the improvements we made between May and June, we noticed because people have a hard time, some people go set up the night before, some people don't. So we created something new called the SWAT team. Acronym, Set Up Assistance Team. And so what that was is it wasn't a person that wanted to be a poll worker all day. We had a lot of people say, I can help, but I can't help afford the help. So we did a kind of a pilot project of, I think we had 50 people that we got here at 6 in the morning. We just put them out to the location. They're here at 5:30.
Anticipate needing set up help.
And it's all part of that. I can say this with poll workers. Poll workers around the country have traditionally been, you want to be a poll worker, you're a poll worker. And I just, that's not my approach.
Catching a bird, what do you do with it now? So.
In my past jobs, I've tended to treat it like a job. So you apply, come to training, get graded during training. And if you know, we have people watching, so people ask a question, sleep in the back, that sort of thing. And if they're not, they don't grade, they don't get hired. And if they, and then when they work, they get graded. So if they don't perform, they get fired. But I don't have that kind of control here. But what we still do is have those principles where we will do grading, et cetera, and then give that information to the parties. Let them do the hiring and firing. Because the parties don't want things to go bad either. So we're going to, work on those things to try to improve the quality of our poll workers. But once again, I don't want to throw them under the bus. We got to do our job first. We got to have good processes. We got to have good training. Question?
Are you also contacting different coalitions and nonprofits that are hyper-focused on voting issues? So some that come to mind are Texas Civil Rights Project, Move Texas, Texas Rising, and they also assist voters. And one of the things we tried to do this past election, I worked at Texas Civil Rights Project, was to help with poll worker recruitment. And we gathered the names, we gathered contact info, but there just was no connecting line to the office, even though the office said, yeah, we would gladly have this info. So is that door open to involve more of the community feedback for what they're noticing as well within niche community?
Absolutely. And so Esmeralda is our outreach coordinator. And so she's got a whole network of people that she's got, emails that they constantly communicate on. Mr. Cedillo's one, and so we want to continue to build that network even larger and larger because, those are our eyes and ears. We get that great feedback, we get recruitment, and that's one of the reasons we're building that communications team so big, is we're trying to have that communications team be the people that communicate with those groups.
My apologies. Great suggestions, great recommendations. But are we done with the agenda, or, as I know,
I think to her point, Eric, if you want to move on.
Stay on the agenda.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes, so if
you want to move on then?
Yeah, if there's no further questions, if you want to do your presentation on strategic and tactical plans, you can do that, Mike.
Okay, give me a thumbs up. So, so strategic and tactical plans. So we kind of talked about some of the, mission, vision, values. When you do a strategic plan, there's this traditional SWOT analysis. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? So we kind of talked about some of our strengths, graded, evaluated organizations, opportunities. What are, what else can we do to be better? What are the threats? What laws or people or whatever, what can hurt us? So we evaluate all that. So in conjunction with you, we want to review and revise the mission statement, consider developing a vision and value statement, and then develop our objectives and key results. So that's kind of the strategic plan at the grand level. So a tactical plan is that, remember that graphic we showed this. So tactical plan is what are the things that we're going to do, and so we're developing this. It's an inventory of our major actions, and what we do is by each department. So we got all those 11 departments. So each department has their own list. Here's all the stuff we need to do to be better. And so here's one thing to keep in mind as we go through this list of things that we're doing and building. We got a real job, and that's to conduct elections. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, now what are we doing to restructure the building? So it's so we try to spend as much time as we can, but sometimes those changes are slower than we might like them to be, because We got a real job to do, and that's to run elections. And so what I want to talk about now is just provide some highlights of our tactical plan from each department, just a sampling, if you will, to give you some idea of what we're working on for the future. So if you look at the top, this is our executive level at our facilities management. Right now, we're operating out of 3 facilities. And it's really difficult. And so what we're doing is right across the parking lot here, we're building a new facility. It's going to be a beautiful training facility and a polling place, because we don't have a polling place. So it's a really large polling place, and then a new warehouse. So we're going to consolidate all of our locations into 2 buildings, one area.
So the polling place, do you anticipate using that for early voting and election day?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is a picture, a rendering of the front of it. This is just kind of a floor plan. I mentioned, up here it's a big polling place, a big training facility, where the training facility is very similar to this, a room like this, but in addition to that, it's a breakout room. Because as we develop new training, it's a lot of, we want to have people have more hands on. So we have 75 people in a training group, then we'll break into 3 groups of 25. They'll work on this piece of equipment. 25 will work on that piece of equipment, 25 on another piece of equipment. So they get that hands-on personal attention. We really want to focus, adult learners, you have to kind of hit them in different ways. Some of them learn, through PowerPoint, some of them through videos, some of them learn through touching. So we're going to hit them in all those different ways. You're going to see in this upcoming election, some of those. We won't be completely done with the training, but we'll be well on our way.
Do you think it's a practical option to use any of the government centers for training or satellite training?
We're considering that too, because there are some. I looked at one in particular. I thought, oh, this is beautiful. And so we may have some remote training. I can tell you that in San Bernardino County, 20,000 square miles, we had how many locations?
14.
14 locations. We're all everywhere. And so we may try that. We're going to try to. We got to crawl before we sprint, so we'll get. We're going to modify things. This is a beautiful facility with great commitment from this county, where they are not shy about giving us the tools that we need. We just need to rethink how we use this facility a little bit, clean up. Keep in mind that the staff here moved in here in January of 2020, and it was in the presidential COVID year. So now we've got to kind of recover from that and get things put away. It's like when you move into a house, you put the boxes in the garage and it takes 2 years to get them put away. So that's kind of where we're at. We're spending a lot of time doing some one of our storage areas, for instance, in the picture. Catch up on our purchasing. That's Dee group is just doing a fantastic job of. We've got a backlog. Dee, a new admin manager and a new accountant were hired on July 6th. So in a short period of time, they've done so much catching up on this kind of like a 2-year backlog of stuff that we need to, some of our purchasing and some of our billing methodology. So this one I want to talk about. This one I want your opinion. So finalizing our billing methodology. So when I came here, we had bought $25 million worth of equipment, but we hadn't produced a new price list to charge jurisdictions for it. And then we had our pricing for our poll workers went from $10 and $12 up to $16 and $18, but we needed to do that back in November to get people to work during COVID. We had 432 vote centers instead of 348. And so increased costs there with all those new facilities and all the people who go in there. And then we had a new billing methodology because we used to be polling place based and now we're vote center based. So you distribute the costs a little bit differently. And so what we did in February is we said, we've got to resolve all these things that hadn't been resolved. And so we took those on and we said, okay, how should we bill? And we basically followed the model that's used in Texas. And I'll talk about that. But so when we went and we told, in February, we gave estimates for the May election to the jurisdictions, they about flipped the gasket because they said, this is expensive. Why is it so much more expensive? Well, new equipment, new higher, all those reasons I just talked about. And of course, they're looking at me like I said, I didn't do it. This is the hand that we've all been dealt. And so what we did is to address those concerns of legitimate concerns of those jurisdictions. Here's the if you look on the screen, new billing methodology. I believe I just talked about. So the new billing methodology is this: take the total estimated cost, all your costs of the election, and then you times that by what percentage of the election a jurisdiction is. So if a jurisdiction is 10% of all voters, they pay for 10% of all costs. They're 50% of all voters, they pay 50% of all costs. And so it's a very simple formula, it's very straightforward, very easy to understand. So when we projected our costs for the May election, it was $4.6 million. And that was based on conducting elections like they've always been historically run. And so for Dallas, the city of Dallas, that meant they were 33.81% of the voters. So their cost was $1.5 million. That's what we told them. Of course, they weren't happy about that.
Do you anticipate they ever have a tier option of how much level of service you want for your city, different numbers of polling locations? Doesn't allow you to, no.
So that was the new billing methodology, new price list I already talked about, increased cost for poll workers, 432 versus 348. And so then the projected cost was 4.6 million. So what that meant was there was 102% average increase for every jurisdiction, 100% increase.
Yes.
And so what did we do? We said, well, okay, what can we do to fix that or help with that? So we allocated less equipment using analytics. We reduced the number of poll workers and temp workers using analytics. We transferred, we paid the vendor less because we took on a lot of those things ourselves. And so the final cost of our May election, instead of 4.6 million, was 2.9 million. So it was a reduction of $1.6 million. So we're pretty happy about that.
Did they change the billing for the municipalities and districts?
That's the next couple
I'm sorry.
things. And so they don't even know this yet. We haven't given it to them yet. So with that cost reductions, what that meant then is their costs only increased, instead of 102%, they went up 28% from 2 years ago. So a much more reasonable number. So here's an example. In the 2021 the May election, using the formula for registered voters, with those reduced costs for the city of Dallas, their new cost will be $993,000 instead of that 1.5. So that's what our mitigation helps reduce the cost. So now the question for us and what we're going to be bringing to commissioners is, should we do something further? And so I kind of explained this. So Texas law allows us to charge up to 10% of our equipment costs for every election. So we spend $1 million on equipment. In year one of that, our first election, we can charge $100,000 to those jurisdictions. Year two, another 100. That's 30. So it's basically a 10-year amortization schedule. Actually, more like a 5-year, because there's 2 elections a year. So that's a pretty aggressive amortization schedule. So one of the things that we're contemplating is bringing to Commissioners Court, changing that from a 10% per year, which the law allows, to make it 5%. And so what that would do in the case of Dallas, that would lower their costs, it would lower the cost of the overall election from 2.9 million to 2.1 million, and the result for city of Dallas would go from 900 something thousand down to 734,000. So that's the question posed to you is, because that was one of the charges in the bylaws, is you providing your recommendations about our billing method. So there's a question here now.
Yeah, so are you assuming that all registered voters are then voting within the city of Dallas?
It's not based on turnout, it's based on potential voting, because that's what we have to.
And I guess it's a consideration too. In recent years, we've had not an evolutionary change, but a revolutionary change in equipment and technology. And do we anticipate another revolutionary change in the next few years? Probably not.
Probably not. We've got this, we're probably going to be stable for some time. I don't know how long. I would imagine 10 years. So that's the question. Would you, as a body, and Eric, I don't know how you want to do this, but we don't have to take an action, but if you guys so feel like, based on what we've done to reduce cost, and this will be the way of doing business, we won't see 4.6 million, it'll be more like that 3 million. Because we will continue to use analytics, be lean and mean. But is it fair to look further? Is it fair to look at that amortization schedule and reduce it in some way?
And you are not allowed to make a profit. You are government, so.
Chair, Sedela, hi, it's Levatta levels. I strongly agree with any reduction we can give. This 102% increase wreaked havoc throughout the county. From the cities to the school districts, everyone was just so unprepared financially, fiscally for this, for the invoice that just showed up and needed to be paid. And so
I would say the invoices haven't showed up in the estimate.
Well, the estimate.
They did have to be
and for a city, a school, and a county, that invoice, that estimate is still budgeted regardless. They can't hold that from year to year, so that money has to be approved, to be able to pay. And so that's another issue, is the billing cycles and the payment cycles and budgeting process cycles are all everywhere. And so it's difficult for an administrator or superintendent to attempt to plan for an election and the budget, and the CFOs are attempting to budget for this, and all of a sudden it's 102% increase.
And that's, I should mention, that's exactly why the commissioner, so people said the commissioners court, why didn't someone give us a heads up last summer when we were planning the budget? And that's a fair question. And so what commissioners court response was, hey, Mike, take a look and see what you can do. You have some alternate plans to, we can't just say you don't have to pay, but what can we do to ease the burden on these jurisdictions? And this is the
response, and I appreciate that, and that's why I strongly support the response, is because I know how the city managers were scrambling. They were calling one another. Everyone was just up. It was a total upheaval, and so something they had never experienced before. And of course, they want to blame you, but we know that some things had occurred prior to you coming on board. So I completely support whatever reduction we can give the cooperating entities.
Mr. Cedillo, this is Renato de Santos. My question is, how does this compare to the prior elections? How much they would have paid then? Are we in effect giving them, if it's 28% where you're at now, if we go with a 5%, it would be lowered to 10%?
I apologize. We should put that number in. I don't know what the increase would be. You have that.
The increase from 2019?
If we go to the 5%, how much of an increase is it from 2019 to 2020?
I can actually pull that.
Could it be less?
It's not as significant as you think. If I could just speak, the original rental list that we were using was not up to date with the current cost of the actual equipment. So what Mr. Campbell had to do was go back to
Commissioner's Court and get that update. So when that took place, it raised it quite a bit. But what we have done is gone back and made sure that we are effectively putting the correct amounts in there. We're watching and maintaining that we're looking at personnel and we're making sure you really need to be here or what are you doing. So we've streamlined it. They won't scream as much this next time. However, most of them all paid their deposit, so they'll be happy that they'll be getting a refund. But we're gonna try to be a little more fiscally responsible when we are presenting the cost audits.
And I don't believe it was about being fiscally responsible. I think it was the communication. And, you know, just like if we looked at our TSU bills, and then all of a sudden, 3 months later, it's 102% more increase. There's not one person that would not be on the door calling somebody and knocking down doors. Why is my bill? And yes, they were paying the deposit because they didn't have a choice. They needed to host, and they are not prepared to host elections on their own. They don't have the machines, they don't have the capability. And so even though some of the districts and the city managers want to consider, you know, trying to go on their own, they really have done research on trying to go on their own, but they can't do it logistically and fiscally. And so therefore, it's not about the financial responsibility, it's about communication. And they don't mind paying, they'll pay it because they know they can't do it. And it's almost like in that type of relationship, I don't have a choice, I have to pay you because we can't do it on our own.
If that is the case, I think I agree with that. I would vote for or lean toward leaving it at 10%. That would be us the moving room in case something happens. Just I mean, why don't break down to the bare bones yet? You may just do that later on.
I didn't see like Elaine Campbell. It sounds like Camila, you know a lot of information about it. I don't. So I absolutely don't have enough information to even make a comment personally tonight. So I would be able to say I strongly support, I strongly don't. I need more information. Like exactly what happened, what was the cut, I didn't go through, I guess, what you were able to see. I'm not aware of all the ins and outs of that.
Was it not correct? Each of the commissioners have their local government outreach person on their staff. And so maybe we need to acquire input from those specialists who are meeting and talking with the cities and ISDs and such. So
I can tell you this, I'm going to be going to Commissioner's Court very soon with probably maybe an exec session, maybe two other meetings, but with this proposal. So that's why I'm bringing it to you today to see if you don't have to have an opinion, but if you have an opinion, you might want to.
Michael?
We should have a couple of questions. We're at 10. Question on the floor is, do we go from 10 to 5? Is that what I understand the question is?
We're at 10 now.
Right. So the question before is, we're at 10, so do we go from 10 to 5? That's the question.
That's the question.
Okay.
My question to you is, are there any implications for future acquisition of equipment or such by lowering from 10 to 5? And then also, are other counties, you mentioned the law allows 10%. What are we, like a Tarrant or other area counties, do we know what rate they're doing?
I do not. Good question.
I already spoke, so if somebody else wants to speak, I don't know. Elaine again, Lincoln. So, when you're saying you need to go soon to commission, so is the process for us to advise you to what to do? And you will not go until we have advice, but you will go even if we don't have advice yet because we don't have enough information?
I was asked by Commissioner's Court to come up with alternatives. So this is the alternative. So what I'm bringing it to you is you know, in the bylaws, it kind of talks about that you provide advice for these kinds of policies. So,
right.
like I said, you don't have to take an action.
I want to be able to give advice, but I can't give advice without data.
Hey guys, can y'all hear me?
You're muted.
Yeah, I don't know how to mute. It says
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So what I'd like to do, and in most of these instances, of course, would have a committee.
You're muted, Eric.
I don't know what to tell you. He needs to unmute me.
He's frozen.
Now he's frozen.
Yeah, you're not unmuted for me.
Yeah, they can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
Now he's really.
Oh, my goodness.
Eric,
Can you hear me now?
Very, very loud.
Volume down, yeah.
All right, do we have,
The volume is really, really loud.
Chance.
we have a the tech work.
Right now.
Okay. What we would usually do, of course, in this situation would be try to break this into a committee and then have the committee report, and then we vote on it in terms of what we would advise. And I think it's a good question, Michael. When are you planning on getting back to the commission? Is it something that you're trying to do this week or next week, or what does that look like?
We're trying to close out our budget. The county, the cities are trying to close out their budgets too, so time is of the essence.
Okay, and so are you looking for something this evening, or would it be possible to get back to you early next week?
I think tonight would be when we would need.
Are you looking for like a consensus vote without an actual?
That's up to you guys. I'm not a part of your body. I'm just your administrator. So that's up to you.
I have a question. Eric,
Yeah, let me just say this for conversation, just really quickly for the group. I'm probably going to go ahead and ask for a vote so that Michael can make a determination, because time is of the essence. If anybody has any strong feelings about that, then go ahead and voice them now.
Eric, I just wondered how many elections does the equipment usually run through? Because it seems to me like an amortization approach makes sense, and 10% and 5% are arbitrary numbers.
Did you catch that, Michael?
Yes. It's really hard to say. I mean, I've got a piece of equipment in back now that we paid $400,000 for, that through the stroke of a pen by the governor is now obsolete. I can't use it anymore. And so, the equipment that we have right now, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine typically you're going to get 10 years out of that type of equipment. But you never know.
Okay, since we're at 8:08, Michael, if you could just kind of state for us what exactly that you're looking for in terms of advice from this committee, just kind of generally state that for us.
Sure. The question is whether or not the CEAC recommends changing the rate that the county charges for the use of equipment from 10% of the total cost per election to 5% per election. And you could go to 1%. I mean, my proposal is 5%, giving you those numbers, but you could be 3%, 5%, whatever you would want to recommend.
So it's all in favor,
No, wait a minute, wait. I don't know Robert's rules of order good enough, well enough though, but don't we have to make, I don't think it's appropriate to vote. So isn't there some sort of,
I think your chair is probably, he's probably asking for my opinion because he wants to ask, he wants me to frame it so someone can make a motion.
It's just a discussion right now, Tessa, before nobody's made a motion yet. So it's just a discussion in terms of people who have strong feelings about not wanting to vote. We're just kind of talking about it.
okay. I think I made my opinion already.
Okay.
I have a strong feeling that we should not vote yet, and that I can't imagine that there's a difference between today and early next week, frankly. So be able to have time to research it.
The government calls for urgency sometimes. So Eric, I'll be so bold as to make a motion. We'll just a test vote that we go with the change in amortization from a 10% number to a 5% number to apply to billing purposes. So.
Okay. We have a second. Any discussion? Ray?
Yeah, I had asked earlier if there were any implications for our ability to do business in the future if we adopt it. Could you answer that question, Mike?
I don't think so. Dee Dee, you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, The 10% has always been standard. However, the 5%, we can still function, we'll have some kind of leeway. However, the reason why we're needing a vote today, these cities and these school districts needs to close their fiscal year.
Absolutely.
I cannot, there's no way that I can keep voting them and then expect them to have money ready for November. I've got to get these closed, we're already behind. So their budgets are really stretched like ours are. So I just have to get it, get this finalized. So that's why it's really of the essence that we get it.
It's more than just commissioners court. We're affecting all the local operating budgets, operating and maintenance budgets.
Yes, sir.
And let me say this, Chair Sedillo, some of our cities and our school districts actually have board policies that they're gonna be in violation if they're not able to pay within a certain amount of time. So, I mean, we're now jeopardizing their ability to actually operate within the law, within their own board policies. Because they have approved board policies that require them to have zero budgeting, balanced budgeting, and so that's their board policies. And so because of some of these decisions that they were hit with, they were in violation.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call a question.
Yes. You recognize Lawrence, go ahead.
What's the motion on the floor?
The motion on the floor is whether we call a question, whether we vote on the original motion.
What?
By Robert's rules.
And calling the question, if it passes, it closes debate.
Debate is closed. We're going to go ahead and call a vote. We're going to go ahead and vote on the question on whether or not CEAC advises Michael Scarpello to go before the commissioners and advising them to move the amortization from 10 to 5%. All those in favor, raise your hand. I can no longer see the video virtual either, so I don't know if anyone can.
I vote no.
Vice Chair, if you want the secretary to make those comments.
Are we voting yes or no? No, I can't tell what the vote's going on.
In the affirmative, the question is whether or not to move from 10%, advise Michael Scarpello to move the amortization costs of the equipment from 10% to 5%.
Should we do a roll call that there'll be clarity instead of the?
I would like to call for a roll call vote. A
That would
vote,
be fine.
a vote,
Go
so the
ahead,
people
Tess.
on the phone can vote as well. We can't hear you, sir.
Maybe the tech. I can no longer see the folks on the virtual.
Yeah, if whoever's running the slides will undo the slides, you'll be able to see. The slides are what's taking precedence by the
Yeah,
host.
can we close the slides?
This is Millie. I put my yes, and Camila put her.
Camila voted which way?
She put in the chat yes. And with a yes.
Millie, Camila, and Walter vote yes.
Walter votes no.
Okay. So Michael, we have 3 yes on the virtual and 1 vote no. If you could get a count there in the room.
8 in the room.
8 in the room. That's a total of 11 in the affirmative.
And I'm no.
And 2, 1 virtual no, 1 that I can see in the room. The vote carries and the motion passes.
You have a final count for the record.
I've got 11 affirmative. 2 no. Should be 1 fine.
11 yes.
Do you have the names recorded of the votes? We need to record names just for case there's any question or challenge. So.
Just the two no's and then everybody else.
Was that Hopkins who said no?
That's correct.
Okay, and
Elaine Campbell, no.
I got it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Be careful what you ask for. So, but.
Michael, can I ask a courtesy in the future is for things that you've got action items or anything like that, to send that to us a couple weeks in advance and let us digest that so that we can come prepared to service the needs of what have you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. Question.
I just have a clarification question since I'm new. This is Renato Santos. This vote that was taken is basically to advise you to go before the county commissioners. Is there a request then that we, and I'm assuming that the proceedings here are public, but we do not share information with anybody, or is what you're going to the commission for, or
This open, the open meeting.
so totally open.
It's recorded and
Okay, Michael, do you have anything else?
Can I continue? So I was doing highlights from the, okay, so I'm trying to race through some of these. I mentioned, we've got escrow accounts, what we charge these jurisdictions, not only for the May and June elections, but going back to 2019, trying to close those accounts. That's what Dee Dee's group's doing. For our communications group, Esmeralda and her team, we hire a new communications manager. They're going to be communications strategic plan, and they're going to partner with you, and they're going to bring that probably before you guys in December to kind of let you help weigh in on that plan. And we're going to continue to work with you to expand our outreach efforts to other new organizations, like what was mentioned over here. Plan our National Voter Registration Day activities. National Voter Registration Day is September 28th. Esmeralda, do you want to just give a quick summary what you guys have got planned?
Yeah, for National Voter Registration Day, we are going to be at Warren Park on the 25th. We're going to be doing equipment demonstration. We're going to be doing voter registration and education, and then also on the 28th, which is that Tuesday. On our website, I have a list of also other events that are going to be going on throughout that week. So I can share that link with you guys as well. We're partnering with other groups. So if you guys know of any events also, any events that you might have, I can also list them on our website, or if you need volunteers, I have access to the VDR database that I can send volunteers to you guys. At Clyde Warren, we will be there from 12 to 4 on that Saturday on the 25th. And then on Tuesday, we're going to be there from 10 to 3. The 28th. The 28th is National Voter Registration Day.
The next one is in communications is to monitor legislation and statutory changes. So the Texas legislature is currently proposing some what I consider harmful legislation that makes the election administration more difficult. And so, there's been a lot passed, but there's one more session that as an administrator, I typically don't weigh in on the politics, but I weigh in on the act as an administrator. So there's some coming up that's could be very harmful, difficult. And so for the legislation that was passed, I gave you an advisory list of 30 bills and 8 joint resolutions that was passed during the regular legislative session. So that's in your packet. And then most of those bills are effective September 1st. And then I think we put a brief summary, from the Harris County, put a brief summary of SB 1 that passed in the second legislative session. And that bill is due, any bills that were passed during that session are due December 2nd, become effective December 2nd. I can tell you that there's several lawsuits related to these changes. So there's 3 particular lawsuits that I was named as a defendant. Vote.org versus Bear, Travis, Cameron, Dallas County for related to HB implementation of HB 3107. Then LULAC et al. Versus Travis, Bear, Harris, Hidalgo, Dallas, and El Paso counties related to SB 1111. Then LULAC versus et al. Versus Secretary of State, Attorney General, Bear, Travis, Harris, Hidalgo, Dallas, and El Paso related to SB 1. I believe there's also an SB 1 lawsuit that's not against these defendants, but some other defendants. And because we are in litigation, I'm personally in litigation, cannot come. So you as an organization can talk about it all you want, but I won't be.
I actually have a question. You ready for a question?
And answer questions about this.
No, it wasn't about this at all. My question was, because actually I had that written earlier, the question I was going to ask you if and maybe you don't know the answer to this yet, if there's an expectation based on the processes that are being implemented, and they have to completely change after these legislation things. Is that a possibility that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever a bill passes, we have to look at how it affects our operation. So we're in the middle of doing that now, looking at these 30 bills. What do we need to do tomorrow?
Are you able to comment on, or have you thought about that, what apparently there's a new requirement that there needs to be video monitoring / observation of central county when they're stationed in their operation, or?
I don't have a comment.
Okay, I understand.
Should I continue?
Yeah.
Voter registration department, a lot of our correspondence, what we send out to people is very difficult to read. We've got a lot of legalese, et cetera. There's been a movement through the last 10 years or so in the elections world where we moved to what we call plain language, simplifying things for people to make it easier to read. So we're going to do that with all of our correspondence, thinking about how we write. And this is just an example. This is you can't read it, but you can visualize it. So on the left-hand side, that's kind of this notice to confirm voter registration address, very bunch of verbiage, a lot of legal language, et cetera. New notice will be formatted, a lot of bullets, a different approach. So we're going to be doing that with all of everything we do, frankly.
Michael, on the voter registration activities, are you getting your abstracts from the county clerk on probated wills and death certificates?
Yes.
That's their requirement.
The redesign of our mail ballot materials is kind of the same thing. When I got here the first day I was here, I was looking at our voter mail, vote by mail stuff, and I got out my red pen. I'm like, we're changing this. We're going to simplify it. Then I come to find out that I can't because they're state forms. And so, this is kind of a picture. I mean, there's your state forms that are very, very not unuser friendly. So, good news is the Secretary of State's office has told us that they're very much open to us working with them to try to make things a little bit simpler. But they're limited because there's a lot of stuff that has to be on those envelopes and those instructions. In my opinion, the legislature is way too aggressive in not their intent of what they're doing, but the way they do it. They don't allow for experimentation in the county because we know how to run elections. When you try to put everything in the law, inevitably it's just not going to translate well into using. There's just too much micromanagement from us. And what the result is, and I can tell you this. When I lived in California, there's all these firms moving, corporations moving to Texas. Wow, Texas would really have it together. Must be streamlined, must be taxes. What a great place to be. One of the reasons I came. And so when I opened up the Coca election law here, I was shocked to see that California's got red tape. Texas got red tape on red tape on red tape. Way, way more complex I think that's a problem, because that makes it difficult for the voter, makes it difficult for the administrators, poll workers, everything else. So, in my opinion, there needs to be a rewrite of the code. People really need to rethink how elections are done. Because I've seen it in 4 states now, and by far, what we do here is way more difficult than you. Just food for thought. I talked about I already talked about this, the signature verification process with labor-intensive process that we do. We're looking at moving to a mail ballot vendor for our outgoing mail. That's down the road. Redesign of our vote center processes. I kind of talked about this already. Spent a lot of time on making things simpler for the poll workers. Then, of course, the corresponding training that goes with that. Looking at how we're presenting. I talked a lot about that already. This just gives you this is how we revise stuff. So we flow chart stuff out. Here's the steps we take. Look at how can we revise that. Here's an as is versus we try to streamline things better. So our team, this and our everything. This is how we spend a lot of our time in our business flow chart. These are just some examples of how we're simplifying not only our processes, but our signage. We're looking at that. On the left-hand side, that's the existing business markers. So the more modern approach is to have very simple, less is more. So people actually read things.
The cone doesn't work very well.
Yeah, the cones are tough, they're hard to ship. So this is another one. This is some signage. On the right-hand side is kind of what we do now. We have a whole lot of pieces of paper, kind of blue tape heaven that are fully placed. So we're doing a lot of consolidation of moving all these individual signs into large posters. So the left-hand side is the consolidation. Better looking feel and easier on the poll worker to get stuff on balance. Some timekeeping for our poll workers. We have a paper-based process. We're working with our vendors to keep that part of the e-poll books to keep our time. I already talked about recruitment of poll workers. We work in partnership with the parties. This is one where we had some of those poll opening problems. The reason we had those poll opening problems because we don't know enough about our polling place. We did surveys in 2019. People did surveys and then we put it up on the shelf and never looked at it. So we wanted to have very aggressively resurveying all of our places, having videos, having layouts. So we know those locations inside and out, so we can know when there's shortage of plugs, et cetera. So we can properly get the right equipment out to them. This is one I wanted to report to you. I reported this to the election commission also. We found back in February, 318 provisional ballots from the 2020 election that had not been processed. So they were in some boxes and brought back here. And so we called Secretary of State, consulted with them, et cetera, and found out here's exactly what we're supposed to do with them. We processed them, and I think of those, 63 would have counted with those 318. So 63 people didn't get to vote in the November election because of our. So we're doing everything we can to prevent that sort of error.
And I guess something good is if there was a required curative process for rejected ballots by mail, which that will help. There's a very small percentage of rejected ballots. However, those people getting the letter after the election is over are not happy campers.
That's new legislation that requires that.
Yeah.
I have a question for that, what you just said. So you said that you figured out why that happened with that box, whatever the flood won't happen. You know what happened, exactly what happened.
Cleanup and consolidation of our warehouses. I kind of mentioned this before. We've had a lot of stuff. Some of our messes, so we've been kind of cleaning that up. So this is the way that our Lane Street warehouse working out as opposed to the past. spend a lot of time doing that. Tables and chairs, we rent tables and chairs for a lot of these locations now. So we'll rent chairs and they move their chairs, tables out of the way, put our chairs in. We're spending money, when we should, because we don't have proper surveys, so we want to get surveys, and we're gonna buy our own tables and not rent them. Spend way too much money on that. So that, we probably, I don't know if we'll have that in place by the end. We need to get that fixed. I talked about the supply coordination stuff already, just doing a better job of looking at supplies. Central count, Mike talked about this a little bit, increase our transparency, letting people in, putting tape on the floor saying you can't go past this line, and pulling up all this tape, and inviting people in, and rethinking how those rooms work so that we can have poll watchers come in and watch all of our activity. Talked about these next couple slides of this is taking the stuff away from ES&S and doing things ourselves, the way we tabulate, the way we design our ballots, us owning our own process. Same with our IT assets. We don't have, as of right now, we still don't have proper inventory of all of our equipment. Get stuff scattered around everywhere. So we're working to correct that. We're actually just about done with that. So finding missing equipment.
So, just about every company that I've worked at in the past, when I used to work with IT outsourcing, because one of our jobs was to audit the software. Pretty much every company, that's what he said, as new leaders come, as things change, there's all this software, there's all this software, and sometimes we would find people have duplicate software. There are things that now there's no support on. Are you doing that kind of?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what our new IT team, we're bringing in those new IT professionals. We're in the middle of that hiring process. That's part of what they're doing. I already talked about this, vendor accountability. This is all I had to say here yesterday. With ES&S and about our week what's holding their people fire. Fixing our chain of custody to make sure that we don't have things like I just mentioned, missing files. Our chain of custody for everything. We got to have a proper chain of custody so we know where all of our stuff is. District alignments. We have all these jurisdictions that participate, but they, sent us their maps years ago. We haven't verified. So what we're doing is we're sending new maps to them saying, you need to verify your line. If you want us to conduct your elections, you got to tell us exactly where their lines are. That's really important because they don't, they get stale. They have annexations, things like that. They don't keep us updated. So we're working hard to get that all fixed. Self-service mapping, I told you, a big growth area for us is GIS. So we're continuing to work with that to instead of people buying maps from us, we put everything on the free on self-service.
Michael, do you have an opinion about what you're seeing when we can expect the party primaries to be conducted, date-wise, because redistricting obviously has to occur.
There's a bill out there that says, depending on when they get done with redistricting, they get done past a certain point to push the primary. They get past, it gets pushed again, and it gets pushed another one. So it's like March, April, May. We don't know. It just depends on increase security of our applications, part of the software security, and working with, we had an audit done by the Secretary. The state of Texas was very smart 2 years ago. They hired a consultant to do an audit of all 254 companies. And so they did an audit of us, but we haven't done much with that audit. So now we have our new IT team to make sure that whatever they recommend fix, we fix it. And our IT team has already done a lot of that. Most crap, 13. But we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to bring really thorough audit So we're on that, we're on the waiting list. And usage of our voter registration system is basically system. We want to get rid of them. We want to focus on a single system and build off of that and make sure that our connections, that our data transfer between systems is accurate. Because that's what gets us in trouble a little bit sometimes. If something on the website doesn't, something looks suspicious because someone's looking at one system versus another system. They have slightly different numbers, things like that. So we want to have our voter registration system be the system of record. Improve our website. We're looking at a new platform for that. Our website's not bad, but we want to get better. I already talked about this. We got all this software sitting on our machine. We just want to use it. So, us training our folks. And that's all I had for the report regarding strategic impact.
I guess you have a comment at an earlier presentation, is we had an unrealistic expectation of the speed of data showing up from elections, and you didn't think that was practical because it really got in the way of you being effective.
And so I would just finish by saying, we're going to move as quickly as we can with all this, but I can tell you can't turn a ship on a dime. It takes, like I said, we got our real jobs to do too. So we're moving, if we're waiting for radical change, we're making radical change. So all the things I just mentioned won't be overnight. That's not a comprehensive list. There's a lot more on top of that, especially as far as infrastructure. It's going to take years. And so in the meantime, what I need from you and the public is patience and to see steady improvement, hold my feet to the fire, and make sure that we continue to make steady. Eric?
Okay, before we move to adjourn, I'd just like to thank you guys all for coming out, and I promise I'll be there live next go around, so we won't have any of these communication issues that we're having. But what I'd really love to have, if you would, is if you guys would share with the group a little bit about yourself. I've been on here for a couple of years, and I don't know everyone on here from the past couple of years, and I think that's a shame. I think we should know one another. So if you're willing to, if you'd share a little bit about yourself in that email, I think that Esmeralda sent us, if we could just piggyback on that and tell us a little bit why you're on CEAC. I'd really love to see it and appreciate who you are and what you're all about. But thank you for your service. And if there's no further comment,
Open it up for public comments.
but we'd like to open it up for public comment.
Great comment.
So I need, if you want to step to the podium.
And your name?
Yeah, so I'm Wes Bowen. I'm actually the election integrity chair for the Dallas County Republican Party. And so I think Mr. Scarpello knows what I'm about to ask about. And it relates to the fact that it's been 10 months now, and we still don't have a reconciliation between the number of ballots that were counted off the tabulators as it compares to the statewide voter registration list and the county registration list. So it goes all within the category of the failed e-poll book system. So even though this is not a format for asking questions, my public comment would be, I think the public needs an answer.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Anybody else want to take the podium and ask anything? If not, then we would move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
No second required.
Do we need to schedule them into the next meeting, Eric, or
The date.
wait for that?
Yeah, in December? It's in December.
In December.
I will mention that we do have a December runoff election. What is the date of that?
Good. I think it's the 7th, something like that.
Maybe after that.
Which one is that?
runoff for the joint election. I think we have 6, 7 meeting jurisdictions.
Oh, local jurisdictions that have moved to November?
Yeah.
Okay.
What date is that on?
December 7th.
Tuesday, December 7th. We have a
You don't like it Wednesdays or?
Any suggestions, Michael, Esmeralda? The best date?
Want to have it on a Wednesday? We got the 15th and the 22nd.
22nd's getting too close to Christmas.
15. 15.
Wednesday.
And is the time the same time? 15 to
Yes.
6? Is that okay?
Yeah.
6 is good.
And if you have any suggestions for what you would like to see in that meeting, send them my way. I'll work with Eric to develop it.
Anything further? Nothing further, then this meeting's adjourned.
Sure.
Great job.
I will.